the nuclear weapons, contrary, in principle, to the rules of jus ad bellum. With this exception that we will need to discuss, the exception that the court is making is in case of extreme survival circumstances that the attacked states would be facing, and in this case, the use of nuclear weapons would be justified, so to say, by pragmatic considerations. And this we have to take into consideration because it's very relevant to current practice. The second part of my discussion is about the use of jus in bello, so the rules that are applicable to armed conflicts while they are at stake. So we are changing a bunch of applicable rules, and especially taking into consideration the notion of the lawfulness of the use of CBR and weapons in armed conflicts. What I wanted to point out first is that the UNCLOS is clearly a peacetime convention, so we are not discussing this finding. Nevertheless, it has to be put in regard with the rules applying to armed conflicts, and especially the rules applying to armed conflicts at sea. So as far as this part of international law is concerned, you know that it's mainly about customary international law. So it dates back to the Hague Conference 1907 onwards. And what I wanted to point to you is that it has been somehow gathered informally in what is called the San Remo Manual on International Law applicable to armed conflicts at sea. So this is published in Cambridge, 1994, and this is a kind of a restatement that is used and referred to by many naval forces as a restatement of customary international law applicable to these conflicts. What did UNCLOS change for international conflicts at sea is the geography of naval warfare. Indeed, the UNCLOS has created the very notion of the exclusive economic zone and has changed the way states and belligerent states could develop their belligerent activities. So if I sum it up, territorial seas, straits used for international navigation, and archipelagic waters of neutral states are out of the zones that can be used by belligerents at sea to conduct their activities, their armed activities. On the other hand, the contiguous zone, the exclusive economic zone, and the continental shelves of neutral states are at the disposal, so to say, of belligerent states, although these zones are the zones of neutral states, to which the UNCLOS continues to apply if they are parties to it, or as customary international law. So what it means is to say this part is that the San Remo Manual is suggesting more than that, and it is suggesting a hierarchy between these obligations. And especially, the San Remo Manual talks about maneuver operations and the use of military force in the neutral states' exclusive economic zone, as such as to entitle the belligerents, for instance, to lay mines in the exclusive economic zones of neutral states and in the continental shelves of neutral states, to the condition that they would warn the coastal states of the danger, explain the type of mines, and just communicate the size of the land, of the minefield, sorry. This is rather surprising as an authorization or suggestion of authorization to use third states' exclusive economic zone for belligerent activities. It even goes further, this San Remo Manual, and suggests that in case of a conflict where the rights of the coastal state could not be taken into consideration, then these rights of the coastal state would be subordinate to distant state belligerent naval activities during periods of armed conflicts. So here you see that this branch of international humanitarian law considers that the international law on the sea would be subordinate to it. Here I pinpoint the potentially first opposition between states' obligations deriving from the use of different branches of international law. Then the second point is specific to the use of CBRN weapons, and especially to nuclear weapons. I just wanted to start by recalling that it also derives from the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion of 1996 that, in principle, the use of nuclear weapons in an armed conflict would fall short of the conditions set out by international humanitarian law. Why? Because of the discrimination principle and the proportionality principle. So the discrimination principle imposes to the belligerents to be able to distinguish between civil targets and military targets. On the other hand, the proportionality principle imposes the belligerents to make a balance, strike a balance between the casualties and the lawful military objectives they have. And arguably, the use of nuclear weapons in such armed conflicts does not allow the belligerents to discriminate and to use force with proportionality. This has been concurred by different statements by the International Committee of the Red Cross, 1997, immediately after the opinion, and then again in 2001. Nevertheless, today's doctrine, so the most recent doctrine, suggests we would distinguish between strategic weapons and tactical weapons. Very easy distinction. Strategic weapons are long-range weapons, like the intercontinental ballistic missiles, with a full-scale effect, so large explosions, large damages. Strategic weapons are meant to be sent very far from the front line into the enemy's interior, so you don't have great precision in their use. On the contrary, tactical weapons are low-yield weapons that were designed, even back to the Cold War, to be used in front lines where allies would be nearby so that you don't strike them together with your enemies. So recent doctrine is suggesting that the use of tactical nuclear weapons would be compatible with the rules of international humanitarian law. And I wanted to refer to Judge Schwebel's submarine case. So it's in his dissenting opinion in the advisory opinion of 1996 of the International Court of Justice. Judge Schwebel has found lots of examples to try to make the point that it is not always that the use of nuclear weapons is contrary to international humanitarian law. And he says that using tactical weapons against submarines that would be nuclearly armed would be compatible with international humanitarian law because it would meet the principle of proportionality. The damage of the submarine's missiles could inflict on the population and the territory of the targeted state is almost null because we are in the middle of the sea. And it would outweigh the use of nuclear weapons on any land. So this is an argument about proportionality that many scholars in international humanitarian law take today, including the latest documents published in the Oxford Handbook on International Law of the Sea. But it seems that there is a problem with the law of the protection of the environment, including the clauses that are specific to international humanitarian law, and I will stop with this last potential conflict of obligations, when you just know that international humanitarian law prohibits belligerents to target poisonous targets or embarkations, including nuclear installations, because of the effects or poisonous effects on the environment. So I will stop here just with a very, very small conclusion. I think this field is deserving greater discussion and I will stop here. But we have contestation somehow of many core concepts of public international law. What is a threat? What is a state territory? And what is the law of international armed conflict applied at sea if it's not put in relation with the law of the sea, environmental law, and general international humanitarian law? I think we will have the opportunity to discuss further these questions, both from the legal perspective, but also from the diplomatic perspective, which is clearly at the core of these unresolved issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for this very clear and informed contribution. You made the transition, so I can move from now to Pascale RICARD. On the question of the limitation arising from the long-term law.
Okay, I think it works now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers of this very interesting workshop, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this subject of the environment. During the military exercise conducted by the American and Australian navies in 2013, bombs have been dropped on the Great Barrier Reef, which is a UNESCO Common Heritage of Mankind. The US Navy jets were forced to drop the bombs because civilian boats were spotted near their original target. 2 bombs were inert and 2 carrying explosives but not armed. This incident was strongly criticized by Australian environmental associations, arguing that military activities are to be conducted with consideration of the conservation of the marine environment. This incident illustrates the potential conflict between different uses of the sea, here environmental protection and military activities. Indeed, military activities can have negative effects in the marine environment, species and ecosystems. For example, the use of sonar or underwater detonations and acoustic waves emissions are an